Yeah, excuse me. Whoever has the Girl Scout cookies, can I have one, please?
All right. We have technology. If people could please either take a seat or make their way, please. Otherwise, when I say bend, you say Lapine. Bend! Bend! Yeah, didn't work. All right. Thank you. I will now resume the February 14th, 2023 meeting of the Ben Lapine Schools Board of Directors. We'll go back to diving into curricular adoptions, and we will be led by Dean Richards, the Director of Secondary Curriculum Instruction and Systems, and Julie Walker, the Director of Elementary Curriculum Instruction and Systems.
Good evening. Want to share a little bit with you all. I'm going to share a little bit on our math, where we're at with our math adoption in our secondary schools. And then Michelle Clements, our teacher on special assignments in language arts, will come up and talk about the language arts components. And then Julie will talk about some of the other pieces that are happening in elementary school. So Linda Adams, who's back here, Give a wave, Linda. She's our teacher on special assignment. She's done a really great job working with our teacher leaders in mathematics, both at the middle and the high school level, to work through a process to come up with some new curriculum adoptions for both of those levels. So both the middle and the high school got together last spring in separate meetings, read this common text on catalyzing change in mathematics. The middle school one is on the screen up here, but there's a high school one as well, and look through these national recommendations around what great mathematics instruction looks like, and then pulled together some guiding principles that are in your packet that provided a focus for the curriculum team, which is another more teachers that are built into that process. So also as part of that, Linda led a survey of students. Over 1,500 students took a survey about their experience in mathematics and developed some trends around what the students were saying about the instruction that they were receiving. So then the high school is currently doing some study of a curriculum. That we have 22 teachers who are piloting some curricular tools to kind of decide what's going to be the best fit. And middle school has narrowed it down to 2, and then we'll go through that same process. Linda's been delivering curricular tools. I know some of the folks in the room tonight have had visits from her with big boxes as she's getting her steps in to bring things for people. So the timeline of where we've been working on for the mathematics pieces is last year we kind of started, we had several of our instructional coach curriculum leaders, ICCLs in mathematics, worked on a state adoption to look at all of the curricular tools that the state brought forward. And so we kind of got a little bit of a head start looking at that work a couple summers ago. And then we did another filter here with some curricular pieces that are going on now. So we're in that piece where we'll come back to the board with some recommendations of some tools to look at. And then next year, both at the middle and the high school level, we'll have those official adoptions and work with some professional development through the studio model where teachers come together, look at lessons, teach a lesson, debrief that lesson. And so it's like job embedded PD, not sort of just here's the books, but kind of to develop those next pieces. And so we'll kind of continue that process as we move through thinking about the pedagogy, because the materials are only as good as the great instruction that our teachers are delivering every day with our students. So we'll continue with that ambitious math work from TDG, Teachers Development Group, which is a group that provides a lot of mathematics professional development. So we're kind of in this process. We're kind of getting ready to bring a couple of things to you, and folks have been working pretty hard on that. So I'll have Michelle Clements, our teacher on special assignment for language arts, come up and talk through the process for language arts as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to spend my 3 minutes largely on this slide because I know I'm going to see you again in a couple of months when we submit for our official approval. So this slide, you'll notice, has a 5-year span for this adoption, and that is correct. I have been working on this adoption for the last 5 years. And why is that, you might wonder? The answer is in the pictures on the right, which are the values that have led us in the work. And in 2018, when I started this, we had a lot of amazing teachers doing amazing things, but we didn't have a pathway for voice and choice for our student body. We didn't really have a pedagogical pathway where students could really know that their stories deserved to be heard and deserved to be told. We also didn't really have a pathway for equity. We also didn't really have a pathway for cross-site collaboration. And so I'm really pleased to be able to tell you that as I'm standing here now, 61% of our secondary language arts teachers have participated in this adoption in the development and construction phases. 100% have participated in various parts of the implementation, but to have 61% participate in such a meaningful way is really wonderful. So these are the slides that I'm going to blast through, and I'm going to talk to you about them in more detail in a couple of months. So this is the timeline, and the yellow color is the reading work, and you can see it started in 2018 and is completing this year. And assume that this work involves all stages of vertical, horizontal alignment, collaborative team building, pedagogical upgrading, as well as policy, creating sustainable policy and processes. So that was the reading work. The writing work is in green. And once the reading work was well underway, we started the writing. And again, all of that vertical and horizontal alignment along with the training pieces. Then we add the blue, which is the CDA, or the Common District Assessment. And that is a multi-source essay outcome that students take as the culminating task in a multiple week skill building unit. And by next year, every 6th through 12th grade student in this district will be participating in a grade level outcome. And we're really proud of that. That's the first 6 through 12 alignment piece that we have fully implemented. And that will be starting in the fall. And then the final is the community feedback aspect of the adoption. And we currently have 6 planned meetings, presentation meetings that will take place over the next 2 months. And so we will have done that before I talk to you again. So that's what is happening in language arts.
I did it. Yay. Okay, so I want to just update you on where we are at with at least 2-year process in our language arts adoption. Last year was our foundational skills adoption, and this year is our first year of implementation. I believe we're on week 16 of implementation. And I want to just start with a celebration for all of our educators, our elementary educators, our specialists, our strategic team members, our coaches, our mentors, and our administrators for the really heavy lift that it takes to implement a new curriculum. It's a ton of hard work. And so our goal is 100% of K-5 teachers using our foundational skills curriculum. And we're very close to that right now. So I'm very proud of that work. And now we're on our next step of really refining our instructional practices, working on student engagement and small group instruction. And we'll just continue working on that as we move forward. So far, we've had ongoing professional development this year, both in our Educator Network days and through instructional coaching and collaboration amongst our grade level teams. We also have had regular site visits to work with our administrators on leading the work of foundational skills, and we'll continue that work as well. So to the next phase, so our first phase of the adoption was foundational skills, and then our next phase is really what we call our content block. And the content block is basically the rest of language arts. So we are talking about language comprehension, we're talking about writing, we're talking about listening and speaking. And so we have a team of 25 educators that are on the team from across the district, and they have participated over the last 4 or 5 meetings that we have had, really diving into the most current research, the most current evidence on what it is that we need to accelerate literacy in our schools. And one of the key accelerators was that kids learn how to read. So that's our foundational skills piece. And then one of the other key accelerators is around a knowledge building curriculum. And that is really what we're trying to build in that content block. So we are trying to look at materials that build knowledge over the elementary experience. And so we have so far drafted core beliefs, and you have those in your board packet. And we have submitted those core beliefs both to our community and to all of our educators for feedback. And the feedback that we received identified a couple of needs moving forward. One of those being our staff identified a real need to integrate language arts and social studies into that content block as much as we can. And our students really identified a need for more choice, more voice in what they read and what they write. And they also voiced a need for more relevant, challenging tasks. And so with wanting to align with what middle school and high school are doing, we are really thinking about a workshop model, meaning that kids get a very explicit mini lesson that is knowledge building, and that they have time in that block to really engage in complex text that they choose, and that they also have the opportunity to choose what they read and write. And so that's where we're at right now. And so the team right now is currently digging into the task of looking at 7 different curriculums. And with that work, it's a challenging task. Many are in this room and know. With that work, we're really slowing down and taking the time to make sure that the materials we are looking at align as closely as possible with our science and social studies standards. So we can get at that need of needing to integrate science and social studies in the elementary day. So we are slowing down to do that work. We're moving as slow as we need to, as fast as we can. And then are continuing to gather feedback along the way from our staff and our community. I think that's it. Are there any questions?
When you mentioned the core values, are those, we have the ones for secondary, are the elementary ones the same?
No, they are not. They are different and included in the board packet. I also included math adoption materials within that board packet.
Okay.
Okay, good. And if I could, I forgot to read just a couple of quotes from teachers that are implementing our foundational skills materials. Would that be okay if I read a couple of quotes to you?
Mhm.
Okay. So our curriculum is called Really Great Reading, otherwise known as RGR. So RGR has given me the tool I needed to reach every student exactly where they are in their reading journey, while providing the roadmap to follow for future growth. It has also provided quick weekly assessment data that enables me to efficiently regroup and focus on exact lagging skills during small group instruction. That's from Christy Ebner, who's a 3rd grade teacher at La Pine Elementary. She's here tonight. And then here's another one. Using Really Great Reading this year in kindergarten at Jewel has been incredibly impactful for my students. 100% of my students are considered at grade level or above grade level on our mid-year benchmark reading assessment. Really Great Reading Countdown provides a clear and simple path for teacher planning, saving me time, and engaging activities for students to participate and grow their early learning skills. That's from Jen Norman, who's a K teacher at RE Jewel Elementary. Thank you, and any questions?
I have a question, but I'm not sure who it's best directed at. It might be over here. Obviously, having high-quality research-based curriculum is super important for our students and can be really helpful for teachers. I also know as a former teacher that implementing new curriculum is also a ton of work. And so when we hear that our teachers are in crisis mode, how do we think about that tension between having the best curriculum that we can and putting one more thing on their plates?
You go first. No. No, great idea, great point, Carrie. And one of the things, that you heard Julie say, particularly at the elementary level where teachers teach multiple subjects, is this idea of taking the time that we need. So one of the things that they are working on is getting input about, is it time to just slow down and take more time, not just for this particular curriculum, but Julie's in fact had discussions with ODE about the cycle of adoption and how unrealistic that is at the elementary level. And so advocacy work at the state level for us to do something different.
I'd like to add, I think it's also contextualized, and I think that many teachers would tell you that if we said we wanted to slow down last year and said we're not going to adopt really great reading, that we might have gotten some pushback, because that is such a tremendous resource and puts tools in the hands of teachers that right now can, like, it fixes what I'm gonna do on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And those are the kinds of things that we wanna be attentive to both sides of that conversation. And it's whether or not we're pushing too fast, whether or not we're not pushing fast enough, how we get that feedback and how we're in dialogue creates that kind of conversation and makes it more accurate and more meaningful.
Has, with the elementary reading, in thinking about these core beliefs, I see it in the secondary one, but has the issue of cultural relevancy come up? And the reason I'm asking is because I was actually really shocked when I read the NYU report about Wonders and how many instances it was rated as culturally destructive as well as culturally insufficient.
Definitely. I read that same article and thought the same thing. Yes, within our core beliefs, we have several points that talk about that students need to be able to see themselves within the curriculum, and also not just themselves with the experiences that all of our kids have. And our plan is definitely, as part of our adoption process, to lay over the cultural relevance scorecard for all the different curriculums that we're looking at.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I know it's late on a Valentine's evening, but we are going to now hear from our Deputy Superintendent, Laura. Oh, did I skip? I skipped Dave. Ah, terrible. Shame on me. All right. We are now going to look at our board ends and results for Board End 2 with Director of School Improvement, Dave Van Loo, and Director of College and Career Readiness, Stephen Duval.
All right, thank you. So I guess the division of labor is kind of I'm doing the data, and if you have any really hard questions, they go to Stephen, and then I think things should go pretty smoothly. Okay, here we go. So board end number 2, was it a month or 2 ago? We talked about board end number 1. So board end 1 is this idea of a strong academic foundation. Board end 2 is this idea of passion, purpose, and plan, which really is the idea of when students are getting ready to leave our system, are they actually ready to fly the nest and be successful in what they're going to do? And then board end 3 is going to be the idea around wellness, inclusion, and belonging. So I think that's probably in a month or 2. So this is actually the same slide we looked at last time around, just to refresh your memory on our district's demographics. And again, the thing to point out here is that 95% free and reduced lunch. Those data are wrong as could possibly be. So, and the impact of that is, again, this economic disadvantage issue, where ideally we want to be able to look at historically underserved as a group comprising, students receiving special ed and students receiving ELL services and economic disadvantage and a bunch of different groups. Economic disadvantage is by far our largest. And so when that group doesn't exist in the data, then the whole historically underserved concept really blows up. So we've actually been able to include it in some of the data that we're looking at tonight, because graduation and kind of this Diploma Plus model, it spans multiple years, so we actually have some pretty good data going back, but there are a few holes in these data as well. So here what we're looking at is the first part of this end, and that's the idea around 4-year graduation rate, 5-year graduation rate, and then the 5-year completer rate. So these are the most current data, and this is just a subset of interesting, I'd say, student groups that we would want to look at. The first two columns over on the left are really the numerator and the denominator for that 4-year cohort, which is the third column. And then I just want to make sure that we're really clear when we talk about a 4-year cohort and a 5-year cohort, those are completely different groups of students. The 4-year cohort right now will become the 5-year cohort next year. But so when it's a 5-year cohort and 4-year, those are different groups of students right there. So, and one of the things that I think that's interesting here is you've probably heard a lot about the impact of CTE. And CTE concentrators, those are students who take, I believe, 2 or more credits within a single program of study, and you can see what their graduation rates look like. Another bit of data around this statewide that's really impressive is around students who have basically graduated from, or not graduated, completed ELL programs. They actually graduate at a higher rate than the all students group statewide. So we have some shining examples of some groups really succeeding. So here is, again, these gap graphs that we create in our DART. So the light red at the top would be students who are considered not historically underserved. The gray line in the middle is all students, and then the dark red would be students who are from one of those historically underserved groups. And then you notice we cut this off in the 2021 school year. We're not including the most current year because, again, those data really, they're invalid. I think a couple of things to note here. 1920, the data are artificially inflated because of kind of the way ODE, some of the decisions they made when the pandemic was starting and trying to just be fair and equitable and just in helping everyone deal with what we were dealing with. And I think another thing to point out here is in 2021, you can see this idea that if you look at the dark red, how that's going down at a pretty steep rate. That is really that idea of, you see this narrative everywhere, but certain groups are having a much harder time rebounding from the pandemic than others. So if you look at the not historically underserved, they're back ticking along on their upward trajectory. The not historically underserved is moving in the opposite direction right now. So there's a big equity concern there that we really want to be focused on. And then I just manually added that purple dot. So that is the overall percentage of students for our grad rate this year. It was about 83.5%, so it was up about 1 to 1.5 points over last year. So this is the same data for special ed. You can see, oh, actually, let me back up. One thing I wanted to point out is, even though we're not including just a snapshot of free and reduced lunch in this, or economic disadvantage, their charts look basically exactly like that. When you put them side by side, the numbers change, but the shape stays basically the same. So that's a really good proxy for what the economic disadvantage group would look like. So here are the same data for special ed.
I'm sorry, can I ask you, can you define what underserved subgroups are? Like, what does that consist of?
Yeah, so locally, what we do with that is students with economic disadvantage, that would be students receiving special ed, that would be any racial or ethnic group that basically is not white, Asian, or multiracial, because those are 3 groups that actually tend to outperform a lot of the averages. ELL students, I think that's...
Are LGBTQ?
No, because we don't have those data. Youth Truth is a source of data that we actually do get those data because students self-report, but those are, LGBTQ is not something that we actually report to the Department of Ed, so we don't have a good, clean way to collect those data right now. Moving along, this is Ever ELL. So any student who has ever been in an ELL program, and this is good news. This is pretty much a shining example of what we want these graphs to look like. We want to see these performance gaps disappear over time and have all students performing at the same high level. Then finally, here's four-year grad rate for underserved race and ethnicity. And you can tell in this that, I mean, the gaps are closing. The gap is still definitely there, but it's certainly shrunk. Now, the second part of this end, it's, call it Diploma Plus, because everything needs a plus these days. ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, whatever plus. So this is Diploma Plus, and the idea is students who get the four-year diploma, plus they do something else that is an indicator that they are really thriving in our system and that they are prepared for their future, essentially. And what we've tried to craft here are as inclusive a way as possible to honor student strengths and really all the different pathways students have to be successful. It's moving away from this, college for all mentality and looking at, there's a lot of different things that students can do to set themselves up for success. So what's included in this are, let me back up here. First, let me say that these data are provisional. They are not, all data have error, these data have more error. We're busy trying to build this system, and let me get my list here of what we do or don't have. So right now, what's missing from this Diploma Plus is this idea of the college admissions data. What we want to be able to track is who are the students who actually met the highest criteria for automatic admission to an Oregon university, so either OSU or OSU. So we're still in the process of calculating, the GPAs and the coursework and how all those align together. The other thing that's missing from this is some of the assessment data, bits and pieces of either the state test or SAT or ACT. We haven't been able to pull all of that together yet. Outside of that, these data are pretty solid. And I think how I would frame this is the numbers here are not correct, but I think the story that's being told, I would be shocked if it changed. I think we can be pretty confident in that. And because some of the data are simply missing, I think this is probably a floor. I would expect if this is going to move in any direction, everything would kind of bump up from what we're looking at here. Just thinking about, so all of these different pathways, eventually, some of the data that we want to be able to see is part of our roadmap is really being able to break this down by. So which of these pathways are students taking, and do different groups of students tend to choose different pathways? Again, we don't have those data yet. This is an aggregation of just all the students doing some of these things or any one of these things. In the data we have right now, the most common pathway that students are taking is that basically college level coursework. And I would say it's right around the 50-ish, 55% of students who are meeting this are using it via that avenue. I would say the second most common one is CTE. So CTE is the second most common one. And I would say that's about half of what the college level was. So we're talking around 25%, give or take. And again, these are not mutually exclusive. So you could have students who are taking the college level coursework and CTE or, the seal of biliteracy or all these different pathways.
Dave, can I ask a question about college level credit? Does that include, or does that only count the kids who actually pass the test for the credit?
No.
Or is it just the folks who are in those classes, in those courses?
So it's and Stephen can add a little bit to this if we need it, but it's not based on who passes the test, but it's who has taken those courses and successfully earned credit in college level coursework. Or coursework that could count for college credit, maybe another way to phrase that.
For the, thinking about the gap here, do we have district-wide strategies for how to address all of the reasons why our historically underserved subgroups might not be accessing these as much, or is that up to site level administrators and teachers, like what's the strategy to intentionally close the gap here?
So we are working on ways to do that from the district level, specifically ways to, students for accessing AP, IB, and college level courses, for instance. Those are conversations that we're having at the district level with our building level administrators in terms of recruitment and retention and support of those students in those classes so they can be successful. From the CTE perspective, we just did a data dive as a leadership team with those principals to take a look at CTE participation based on disaggregated data and figure out how we can drum up participation from underserved groups in our CTE programs. So we're in the initial stages of a lot of those conversations, but we are attacking it from the lens of this is a district-wide initiative and a district-wide strategy, and so the supports need to come from all of us collectively versus this school or that school.
So are these college level classes mostly College Now, expanded options, the cultural expanded option offerings that they have as well?
Some of it's College Now, expanded options for sure, and we do. We have a number of articulation agreements with other universities, other community colleges besides COCC as well. And then it does also count in this measure for AP and IB because students can earn college credit by passing those exams as well. And so for Bend High, for instance, their highest number would be from IB. They don't have AP or many articulated classes yet. They're looking to expand those options too. So all three of those kind of fit that bucket of college level courses.
Have you asked the students themselves and the parents who are not accessing these, what is keeping them from doing so? And if you have, how? And if you haven't, how will you?
I know at the building level, they've had those conversations. I can view Mountain View as a specific example. They meet with students that they feel like could participate and have those conversations in terms of why are they not and what can we do to support you? Have you thought about taking those classes and counseling students in that way? Because a lot of times there are students that don't feel like they can, but we want to have those conversations. So system-wide, we can continue to improve and develop mechanisms to capture those thoughts. I do know that those conversations are happening at the building level though.
Is the goal to increase the number of students with the Diploma Plus graduation?
Yes, so I think a great way to look at this is that we are really striving for that full option graduate so that when a student leaves, they can kind of pick a path, and if they change their path, they have the tools to change that path. And so we are looking at these measures that for students, if they have the CTE concentrator, if they've done, they meet the minimum requirements for Oregon Public University admission, whether or not they go or not, they have that option. Junior ROTC, they could pursue a military pathway. So we're trying to increase this so that when the students leave us, they have as many pathways as they want, depending on what they want to do. And so we've identified these buckets or these aspects as ways to kind of capture that if they've done this, then they should be able to pursue a path in that avenue. And so my goal or our goal would be not just to check one of those boxes, but to check as many of those boxes as we can so that they have more options.
We did have that conversation too about I don't want to use the word competition, so that's not the right word, but I don't know what else to use, with some of our high-level regular academic classes, like calculus. If I'm in a CTE program and I'm getting my double credits in junior and senior year, I may not have the opportunity to follow up with a high-level class in one of the content areas or an AP or IB class. So again, what's the key? The key is what does the kid want to do? What does the student want to do? And how do we help them capture their best choices? Typically, we rely on school counselors to do that, but I know that classroom teachers do it all the time. They talk with students when they see students with a particular either interest or skill level, and they. It just is a natural conversation, and I know that still continues. But I'd like to see us actually establish a goal for how many percentage of our graduates who do earn the Diploma Plus.
I think that's great. And I think as Dave mentioned, as we get more accurate and build the data systems to get accurate numbers, that we can have a baseline to continue to track that and set goals for that.
Are you also tracking demographics of the students who are, you know, doing junior ROTC versus CTE? Are you tracking those demographics?
Our
too?
goal would be to have a tracking system for each one of these things based out by disaggregation,
Alright.
disaggregated groups.
Cool.
I don't know, we don't have that system yet, do we?
No, I would say it's part of the roadmap, for sure. It's our intention to have that. It's just, we're not there yet. It's took a colossal effort to pull a lot of these data just in the last month or so and figure out where do these data live, how do we put them together, how do we make sure they're accurate. So yeah, but next year when we're having this conversation, I think the data will be much richer.
Yeah. I mean, one of my concerns is, as a child of a veteran, he chose the military route because he came from a very impoverished home. And so what I don't want to see is this trajectory for students who may sit in that socioeconomic status to continuously just going down a certain path, and to be able to see the different options that they actually do take. But
Yep, absolutely. That's, yep, as I said, that is an intentional part of our roadmap. So we'll know which groups of students tend to be gravitating towards which options, which groups of students don't seem to have access to certain options, and then how do we increase accessibility for that.
thank you.
Just to keep us moving along, here's the same Diploma Plus looking at the special education student group, students with disabilities. See the gap here is a little bit bigger. I mean, Diploma Plus, obviously we've ratcheted up the rigor of what we're measuring a bit over standard graduation. And so we've seen a lot of our group, the gap's gotten a little bit larger for all of these groups. Here's our EVER ELL. Then here's our historically underserved race and ethnicity. Okay, and then the final piece of this end is this idea around surveys and focus groups. So we have a few pieces of data that we're going to share tonight. One is we recently did these community conversations this fall, and it's really a follow-up to probably the bigger, larger equity and excellence work that we did back in 2019. This time we followed up with a targeted roughly 15 groups or so. And here are some of the big themes that came out of that. This idea of adulting 101 is very different than what we saw in 2019. And the idea there is really getting students ready for the real world. So it's like being ready for like personal finances and understanding how to manage money, how to apply for a job, how to navigate a transit system in a metropolitan city. It's just all how to pay your taxes, how to do all of these things that adults are expected to do. Throughout the pandemic, that really rose on students and families' radars. Another thing that came out loud and clear in our the conversations regarding academics is this idea of, I mean, our work's got to be fun and engaging, and it's got to be meaningful and rigorous. And a few weeks ago, I think several of us actually had the opportunity to, over at the Science Center, dig into a lot of the exact comments that students wrote. And it was what really shone through in that. One of the things that shone through to me was students really showing their identity. It's like their identity as learners. It's like, who do I see myself as? Who do I want to really become? And they talked a lot about great teaching and great instruction and things like, I want my homework to be relevant. I want feedback that points to what I need to do next in my learning process. I want work that I want to apply what I'm learning in class to, real world opportunities. And then the other thing that came out loud and clear was this idea of, I need more academic challenge. Like, we can do more than what we're sometimes being asked to do. But yeah, it was pretty powerful to hear what students had to say. And I guess speaking of academic challenge, these are data you've seen before. This is the 2022 Youth Truth. We are about week and a half, 2 weeks from probably getting hundreds of thousands of new data points that will keep us busy for a while. But yeah, these are the newest data we have. So these are the 4 questions that make up this idea around academic challenge. I'll let you read those. And then, so this is what our middle school students had to say about those 4 questions. So overall, we were at the 29th percentile nationally representative sample. And again, this is the one data source where we actually do have really good data for our LGBTQ plus student groups as well. Again, you've seen these before. So high school data looked quite similar as well. 24th percentile, low average-ish range. And then the other thing that was worth pulling out here is Youth Truth actually asks 4 questions around college and career readiness. And what we pulled out here is actually not the kind of the broad domain, but the specific questions, because the domain, I guess, what this domain is not getting at is whether kids feel like they are prepared for college and career. And sometimes we assume that, but it's really, the questions are more, how are schools helping me be prepared for college and be prepared for career? So these are the 2 college applied questions, I guess. My school has helped me develop the skills and knowledge I will need for college level classes. And then the second question there is, my school has helped me understand the steps I need to take in order to apply to college. You can see there's some opportunities for growth that are apparent here. Then here are 2 questions framing it around careers. So my school has helped me figure out which careers match my interests and abilities. And my school has helped me understand the steps I need to take in order to have the career that I want. So again,
And just to confirm, the comparison here is other schools, not just what a perfect score would be.
Right, yes.
Okay.
So that gray bar in the middle is Oregon schools.
Let's see if.
And that's the
Which one
benchmark?
should I point at?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, the gray bar is Oregon schools. So this would be the highest rated Oregon school. This would be the lowest rated Oregon school, and this would be the typical Oregon schools rating right here. Yeah. And then you can see it's a comparison from 2021 to 2022 here. Correct. And we can't wait to get the new data and see what else we can learn from these. And so, I know we've already fielded some questions. I don't know if there's more that you have for either Stephen or me.
So it sounds like we've done this for a few years, or we're going into a few years. What are we doing about the results?
Sure.
So I can speak a little bit to especially those college and career readiness numbers in terms of where students feel like, specifically those last 2 regarding that my school's giving me the information I need to choose a career path. We have, over the last 2 years, been working with a number of teachers, school counselors, administrators, social emotional learning specialists to identify our Life and Career Readiness initiative around making sure that students are life and career ready when they graduate. And this blend of social emotional learning with awareness for with the need those skills the awareness of how those skills connect to post-secondary success. And one of the things that we're working on right now is systematizing this idea of how can we make students aware of the pathways that are available to them and the steps that they need to take to reach those goals that they have. And so we're currently in a process right now where our team is reviewing a number of tools that can support our future centers, our school counselors, our classrooms to have those conversations. And our goal is to have those conversations early on, not just in high school, to make students aware of those paths, and then have some sort of system that can follow the students through their educational journey around their interests, who they are, what they like to do, what pathways that they have interest in, how those pathways connect to what opportunities that we have in our high schools, help them with, if they decide to go to college, those college searches, if they want to go into industry, what trade schools or apprenticeships are available. And so there are really a number of really great program options out there that our team is reviewing to figure out how we can support students to have those conversations. What the data did show, and I think I've talked to the board about this a little bit in the past, is that when our students do access the supports we have to talk about those things, they're very favorably reviewed. And so if a student is aware of and does take advantage of the supports we have, whether that's a counselor or a future center, to have the conversations around pathway and future, they reported in the Youth Truth in that same survey that they had very positive feedback for us. And so it's a matter of making sure students are aware of those opportunities and ensuring that we're having a conversation with each and every one of them and not relying on them to come to us for those conversations, that we're working on and how we systematize that right now.
And so, and is there, I guess, a clear process of you survey the students, you receive the data back, and then identify opportunities and priorities so that the next year when it comes around, you're able to measure improvement from them?
Yeah, so we've heard loud and clear from our students that this is an area of growth for us. We're in the process of attacking that and figuring out systematizing and implementation. Our goal would then be to do that, and then this is the same survey we give every year, and to then see if what we're doing is working and having an impact on students for those conversations. So we haven't reached the point yet where we've have a system where, 6-12 or K-12, we're having these conversations with students, making them aware of pathway opportunities. And so the data that we'll probably receive, I'm gonna guess for this year, is probably gonna look a little similar. But once we can start to implement and systematize those programs or those conversations, then I think we can start to look at the data and see if they're having a positive impact. And continually, we don't have to wait for one data point in a year to have those conversations. We can continually have those conversations with our students in our schools about your thoughts. Is this effective? Is this helpful? And take that back, in more of a qualitative way.
I think you might have just invented a new word.
Yeah, systematize and put them together.
Implementize.
Implementize.
Thank you for pulling all of this new data, Dave. This is stuff we've been really excited to try to measure, and I know it's hard, so thank you. I would like to understand the timeline for when we are going to set our goals, so that we understand, are we looking for an increase? Are we looking for a target? Do we only meet our goals if our subgroups meet our goals? Do we only meet our goals if all of our schools meet our goals? When are we doing that?
I'm going to answer quickly and then hand it over to Superintendent Cook. But that was my last direction, was that when Steve and I met, that the board would like to see now goals, benchmarks put in place for each of our goals, now that we have the goals and the measures. And I requested that he and his team do that work and bring those back to us.
And we haven't set those yet, but we are in the process of getting ready for those conversations. It's, much of this is new, and as we're building this, now establishing what does success criteria look like is part of the conversation, and that's a collective conversation, I think, not just for our team, but also for the 8 of us as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, I would encourage you, as you think through bringing a recommendation to us, that it's potentially less about a number, which is always going to be kind of a stab in the dark, and more about our values around, is it that every school has to improve? Is it that our subgroups have to improve? How are we holding, principals accountable for this? Like more about, at least I am interested more in our values, and then being clear about like growth versus overall achievement, those sorts of things. And then we can pick some numbers and work towards them, but for what it's worth.
Thank you.
Any last questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Appreciate it. All right. We are now going to go to 14D with Deputy Superintendent Nordquist and the District Integrated Plan.
Thanks, Melissa. I will try to move through this quickly. I think much of this we've discussed before, so a lot of it will be review for the board. I was struck as I was sitting there that the last time I presented the SIA plan to the board was in February of 2019, 2020, and a lot has happened in those 3 years. But as a reminder to the board, one of the things that the state did this year was to think about many of our large grants and planning processes and try to integrate them into one, fairly comprehensive plan. We've been working on this for several months now. So when we look at all these are not all grants. The continuous improvement planning process is something that the state requires us to do. Career and technical education, you've heard Stephen talk about that. We have to do plans, but that money comes at a regional level. This is not part of a grant for that. The two big ticket items here are the student investment account, which is approximately $14 million a year to Ben Lapine Schools, and high school success. But then again, all these have been folded in to one planning processes because they have some common elements and they have some common goals. So that's the rationale from the state's perspective. I'm just going to flip through these, but as a reminder, when we think about our plan, our integrated plan, obviously we want that to align to the school board's goals and measures. And I think that's something that we focused on as we've talked about strategic actions over the last couple of years. Even before we finalized these goals, I felt like our strategic actions were leading us in that direction. So just moving quickly through these. And then just a couple reminders about the Student Investment Account and the High School Success Act. While they have certain goals, they also have parameters around allowable uses. So the 4 allowable uses were to expand instructional time, address student health and safety, reduce class size and caseloads, and provide a well-rounded education. And I do want to point out that the state originally stated that as provide access to a well-rounded education. And we in Ben Lapine interpreted that as not creating lots of electives, but rather ensuring access for all students. So most of our money in that bucket went into additional language specialists, additional learning specialists, additional instructional coaches to support every student's access. And then for high school success, the 3 goals are dropout prevention, expanded use of or access to career and technical education, and expanded access to college level educational opportunities. And of course, Stephen has presented quite a bit of the work that we're looking at there. So one of the things that's important is that you have, for the integrated plan, you have ongoing data gathering systems. But I think one of the things we realized early on as a district is, frankly, that's important to us in how we do our work, how we develop and refine a strategic plan year after year. And on the right, we talk about those major sources of quantitative data. Those have always been there. We've always looked at those on an annual basis. But I think where the district has really grown in the past few years is having really important sources of qualitative data. Dave talked quite a bit, and we've referenced many times the Youth Truth Survey for students in grades 6 through 12, for all our staff K through 12, and all our families K through 12. It started at the middle school level this fall, working with ICCL teams, our executive director of middle school programs, met with those teams to talk about strengths, areas for growth, concerns, and we want to make sure that we're doing that at the high school and elementary. We've done selected schools at high school and elementary, but not as widespread. And to be honest, we may not get to all 19 elementary schools every year, but that might be on an every other year cycle. Dave referenced our community conversations, and this is, again, our second iteration of what was, in its first iteration, the Excellence and Equity Review. The biggest difference, and I think the most important difference between this year and 2019 is in that first iteration, we pulled together lots of groups of, I don't want to say random people, random groups, in order to engage in those conversations. This year, through the work of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department and the work of our Equity Coalition, we have lots of existing student and community groups that are long-standing that we used. So we met with the Equity Coalition. I didn't meet. We had outside facilitators, but met with the Equity Coalition, met with the Latino Family Advisory Group, met with, have ongoing relationships with LCA and the Fathers Group. So we had a group of different community organizations that support the schools. And in our students, we have GSAs in all our high schools. We have social justice clubs. We have, affinity groups. And so we were able to go to groups of students and adults who work together on an ongoing basis. And that's not about just listening to what they have to say. That's really about co-creating and being partners in the work. And I think we've made huge growth in that. One of the things that was a requirement through our work with the Center for Educational Leadership is that at every school level, administrators were required to participate in student listening sessions, particularly with focal groups of students. And a number of our middle schools and high schools, as the board has done, have set up like standing advisory groups of students. So again, elevating and honoring student voice. I won't go through this, Dave already mentioned this, but just some summary of some of the big ideas. We will have a full report of the community conversations that we will be sharing probably in about a month to a month and a half. Again, this is data that Dave has shared with the board, but I was just mentioning the quantitative data that was part of that review. Again, not having two groups, but in looking at our reading and math assessment scores in 21-22, that drop in performance that we have discussed. We are above state averages in both reading and math, but those are drops for us. Freshmen on track is a point of optimism, and I think that reflects some of the hard work that the high schools have done, and I want to talk a minute when we get to it about some of the investments that they've put into that. Our graduation rate, Dave talked about that at length. And then looking at our strategic priorities and our resource allocations, I want to talk first about SIA because that is our biggest additional funding source. Sarah mentioned earlier that when the legislature first came together to really put forward a corporate activity task, they did listening sessions all around the state of Oregon. And students with high needs for mental health support, social emotional support, behavioral health support was by far the highest concern. And that's why that was one of the categories of spending that was prioritized for SIA. And this was pre-pandemic. And so when we designed our plan, and as we've looked at it this year, that is our highest priority, staffing to support students' behavioral, mental health, social and emotional needs. When you talk about $6 million, it's a combination of certified and classified staff, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 additional staff in our schools paid for by SIA to help support students with high needs. The second highest area was expanding students' access, and that is primarily our language specialists, and I'm sorry, Kinsey, I can feel her, our language specialists, not our ELL teachers, and our learning specialists. That's primarily where that additional staffing is. We did put money, that was a priority for our teachers to reduce class size, and we prioritized that by our highest poverty schools. Our schools with the largest percentage of HU students, so not just poverty, but students that are the most racially diverse, have the highest percentage of students with disabilities. And we have about $3 million of that from SIA and an additional $3 million of our ESSER funding, which will last through next year. And then the last priority that was kind of a chunk of change was student and staff safety. The high school success plan, between what is typically the carryover and the initial allocation, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about $6 million. And I think, Kina, maybe you were the one asking about, well, what are we doing about this at the school level? So one of the things that is paid for by our high school success is supporting deans, graduation coaches. MTSS and Tier 2 support are like those systems that identify the students with the highest needs, whether they're academically or at the secondary level, it's typically mental health needs, and how do we support those students. That support for credit recovery at all the high schools, dual immersion ELL support. So at our largest high schools this year, this is just one snapshot, but it's approximately 4.5 FTE additional to that school to support student success, graduation rates, students' mental health through the high school success. And of course, that money is almost all at the high school. There's a small amount that can go to 8th graders, but that's almost all high school funding. Then their student success coordinators and instructors, they have two teachers, a clinician and a teacher at our large high schools. So there are two, and those are paid for by high school success. And then life and career readiness programming that Stephen has spoken quite a bit about. There's quite a bit of funding for that in that high school success budget. So as we went through the process and we did a needs assessment with a group of about 35, I mean, you heard it. So our primary needs, we need additional support for students struggling with mental, social, and emotional and behavioral health issues. We need additional academic support to accelerate student learning. We have really good systems and processes now for identifying who those students are at all levels. We don't have all the resources we need to then provide the support, and then continuing work on teachers developing expertise and having the interventionists we need for that early literacy and that foundational skills support. We don't know what those budgets will be. Probably 98% of those two budgets are people working in our district. So there are roll-up costs associated with that as we talk about people having more experience and cost of living increases and step increases and things like that. We recognize those needs. We don't know yet what our resources will be from SIA and high school success. And that's it. Questions?
My question was actually going to be on what you just said, which was understanding the budget piece and how secure we are.
I think it's secure funding in terms of it's a corporate activities tax. So barring a huge long-term recession in Oregon, that's a pretty healthy source of revenue. But our enrollment has gone down and it's funded. You know, there's a per pupil funding with it. So I don't have all the answers, Melissa, to that. I don't know, Steve, if there's.
I can tell you that it is a point of conversation at the legislative level because there are some folks who were not happy that the corporate tax was being earmarked specifically for impacting those particular goals. But there does tend to be quite a bit of legislative support to continue that. And so the governor's budget had a slight increase in that proposal. Now, the governor's budget is not the budget, but it does set kind of an expectation, maybe almost like I've heard it said that typically the governor's budget is seen as a floor for where they start in those conversations. And so at least in that regard, that's some positive news. And there does seem to be comprehensive support in continuing that, which is, in my experience through this first long session that I've been a part of, that does seem to be, you know, like Laura said, these are almost 100% people that are supporting our systems and needs that were identified as a high priority for us. And so continuing that, the roll-up costs are a real conversation, but if we do get an increase above the roll-up costs, then we would expand these services as we see fit. But right now, there doesn't seem to be indication that we should be concerned about that.
Thank you, Laura. But here's my ultimate question, and I think this is the hardest question I think I've trying to figure out. I've been thinking about it for 2 days after reading all this stuff. We have all these services where we know we need more help in certain areas. We need all these different things to help students. But here's my ultimate question. Will the skills we're giving these students help them make a living for the rest of their lives? That's my ultimate question. The skills we're giving them, will they allow them to be able to be flexible enough and have tangible skills to make sure that they can provide for their families, be able to know how to do these things in a way where they're not going to feel overwhelmed, like they can't survive? I mean, ultimately, that's what I'm trying to get to. How do we do that? And that's the key piece I'm always trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I look at all these reports, I read all this stuff, but are we giving them the tangible skills to say when they walk out of school or when they walk into life, regardless of any way they do it, can they know how to go get a paycheck or do whatever they need to do to make sure they can support their families?
Yeah, I think that's a question with a long answer, Marcus. I think the range is really large. I found it very interesting what Dave called out from the community conversations, that both students and their families were worried about that. They were worried that the students did not have we talk about career and life readiness, that they called out in particular that life readiness skills. And, I'm not at this point going to philosophize in all the reasons that could be true, but they're echoing the concern that you're expressing.
I'm just looking at the strategy budget with support student social, emotional, and mental health needs, $6 million. And then at the bottom of the table, there's promote student and staff safety, $1 million. Is there any of that funding that is designated specifically to go towards helping teachers in whether it's trauma training or, is any of that funding allocated to go specifically to supporting teachers?
So for SIA funding, the $6 million, there's not professional development in that for that purpose. Kina, in the SIA, that $6 million is all people. However, in our own professional development budget, we have our district in our general fund, a professional development budget. And there's been a lot of attention to trauma-informed practices and, trying to support our staffs with that. And I think if you read through the comments, there will be, people will say, I've done that. I've had the training, but the needs are beyond what I've been trained or maybe even could be trained. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to, I mean, I understand that like students are our stakeholders, right? Like we're servicing students, and there is a huge part of me, or the question behind the question is that I truly feel that teacher wellness equals student wellness. And is there anything that's allotted in the budget that goes towards that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we have been discussing, because we don't have like some organizations in your HR department will have a whole part of your HR department that is on, employee well-being, and that is not something that has been in Ben Lapine Schools' budget. So, again, there's a big area of need, absolutely.
And I would add to that, I think it's important that that's a conversation that we're having at least every 2 years when we're in bargaining about what those aspects look like. We have certain number of days that we have our educators, and those days are mapped out. And then there becomes this competing demands for, like let's use School Improvement Wednesdays as SIW days for what's going to happen on those, and whether we're doing training or whether we're giving that time to district folks to help do something that's a district level focus, or we're going to give it directly to teachers so that they can have that time to be able to go get caught up or do whatever it is they need for self-care as it relates to doing their job most effective or just getting some work done. And so part of that conversation, and I don't mind sharing this, is that we're asking this much and there's this much time to deliver on all those things. And if we're going to ask more, there's not a secret bucket of money that we haven't accessed. So if we want to expand those services, there has to be a revenue source to expand those services. And time and money, or time and resources, are something that if you ask any of our teachers right now, they're not going to tell you that I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs wishing somebody would come give me some training right now. If those opportunities exist, they're grabbing those and they're filling those in. If we many years ago in the recession, we reduced the calendar year, and we've never recovered from that. And if we were ever going to recover from that, just the cost of paying teachers for one more day is millions of dollars. And so when we talk about the largest investment in public education in history in the state of Oregon is the SIA dollars, and that was $14 million, which is on a $225 million budget, you can see what percentage that is. We didn't extend the day, which means there's no additional training. Like, we are maximizing opportunities for staff to get access to those things. And so how we do that collectively is continuing to be a conversation that we have a lot. And I would tell you that there's opportunity there, but we've got to have really challenging conversations. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that background. For me, part of the question is, I guess, for my education as a new school board, right? Not insinuating in any way that teachers are twiddling their thumbs or that there's a secret pile of cash somewhere, right? It's just understanding and also, I mean, like I said, when you're on a plane, right? They're like, put the mask on you before you help a kid. And that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming in with these questions. So I appreciate it.
And that feedback is very much appreciated, so thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, what I heard there was like not additional trainings. It was the opposite of that. It's like well-being in the corporate setting is like, time to go to the gym, not additional training or PD. So I just want to be clear. I think that's,
Great. Thank you so much. We'll now move to item 15-A. or dot A. GBA-BP, Equal Employment Opportunity, includes updates to revised statutory definitions as per House Bill 3041. It has also been renamed from an administrative policy to a board policy. Additional information on the policies and feedback process is available on the policies page of the district website. Public feedback regarding the policies in review is accepted beginning tomorrow, Wednesday, February 15th, through Tuesday, February 28th via the Google form. Are there any questions? All right, we will now move to item number 16. A, Administrative Policies and Regulations in Review, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Cook.
So first of all, let me apologize for the busyness of this. It looks like we're trying to pass 8 or 9 policies here, but most of this is consolidation of several policies into a more centrally kind of grouped location. And so I'll go through these pretty quickly. The first one, CCB-AP. This is a complete rewrite of the administrative hiring to align with the current district philosophy and practices when we are hiring administrative and supervisory staff. This is also renamed from an administrative regulation to an administrative policy. GB-AP, General Personnel Policies, is a new administrative policy that we built in alignment with the previous aforementioned policy that defines the district's general personnel policies for posting, hiring, and selection of employment. GCC-GDC-AP, recruitment and selection of staff has been updated to reflect current district practices and legal requirements. It's been renamed from an administrative regulation to an administrative policy. GCAA-AR, GCCB-AR, GCCC-AR, GCCD-AR, all are going to be recommended for deletion and are addressed in the aforementioned policy. Another one that we're very interested in getting feedback on is JEBA-AP, which is the early entrance into kindergarten policy. It includes an update to the standard age requirement that aligns with Senate Bill 321. Early entrance considerations have also been updated and those dates have been modified. We are also aligning JEBA-AR, the guidelines, regulation guidelines for entrance and early entrance into kindergarten and first grade. We're recommending that for deletion as now it's in that above policy. We will be accepting comments on these. That information is available on our website, and we'll be accepting those comments for the next 30 days or so. And I'm glad to answer any questions if y'all have any.
Hearing no questions, we will go into board comments. Board comments are voluntary. They are not required. We will start with Director Olson.
No comments tonight.
Thanks, Director McPherson Douglas.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you to everyone in the audience who stayed to spend your Valentine's Day with us. I was volunteering in my classroom's daughter today when she was handing out Valentines, and I'm now really wishing that I had brought a Valentine to each of you, but thank you for being here. So I would like to address the public comment from our teachers tonight and the 150 pages of stories that accompanied those comments. As I read them, I was appalled, saddened, and frustrated to hear what is happening in many of our classrooms in regards to student behavior and dysregulated students. Our teachers are telling us that they are currently unable to serve all of our children well, and that is something that we should be very concerned about. I'm glad to hear that the district is administering a teacher survey over the coming weeks. In the past, I don't believe we have had a strong enough and a frequent enough feedback loop between school-based staff and district leaders, thus the need for our teachers to take the time to write out 150 pages of comments to submit as public comment instead in order to feel heard. I do want to name that teachers are only one voice and that it's also really critical that we hear from students and parents and classified staff and principals and district leaders on this topic, and especially from our students. If any of you are still watching, you are obviously the most important voices for us to hear about how you are experiencing your education in Ben Lapine. I know we have the Youth Truth data. I actually meant to ask Dave. I don't believe there were any questions that specifically ask about students' experience with discipline or student behavior, and so I'd really be interested in hearing more from our students on this topic. But regardless, our teachers are on the front lines. They're with our children 6 hours a day, and so we have to listen to them. And I just want to be clear for those of you that read those 150 pages that when I talk with our teachers, it is not themselves that they are primarily worried about. Even when they are stressed and anxious and emotional and barely hanging on, it is always the students, our community's children, that they are worried about. All they want to be able to do is to do a good job as a teacher and for their students to get what they need. And they are currently telling us that that is not possible. Personally, in reading through the comments submitted tonight and after attending the emotional listening session with teachers and school-based staff a few weeks ago, there are some common themes that I think we must address. And it's really important to me, and really my comments tonight are directed more to the community because I think we must address them both as a district and as a community. And so I'm really calling tonight, calling upon our parents and our guardians and our concerned community citizens to listen as well, because we all need to act to ensure that Ben Lapine schools can continue to thrive and be the high quality school system that so many people choose when they make Central Oregon their home. It's pretty clear to me that we are seeing more students with increased needs, and those increased needs are greater. And those include academic needs, social emotional needs, and behavior needs. And although some of these trends began before the pandemic, I think it is now abundantly clear that our students came back to school after the pandemic with far greater need than we are set up to support. And the question is why, and what do we do about it? I do want to name that earlier in the evening, it felt to me like the comments focused primarily on effectively meeting the needs of students identified with special needs, which is really important, but that is not the full story here. Many of the stories shared by teachers are not students who will ever be identified for SPED services. They are regular education students with extreme behavior and dysregulation, and so our solution will have to reach far beyond SPED services. I was curious if our experience in Ben Lapine was unique, so I did some national research, and as you said, Steve, this is indeed a national trend. One recent report by Bellwether Education Partners called Common Ground shows that student verbal abuse of teachers, widespread disorder in classrooms, and student acts of disrespect are up significantly from 10 years ago. The same report also discusses a phenomenon called peer effect, the impact that a given student's classmates have on their academic achievement, which shows that exposure to disruptive or aggressive behavior in classrooms can impact students' own behavior, and that student reports of disruptive behavior in classrooms are negatively correlated with achievement. The report also speaks to the reality that effective implementation of restorative practices remains a challenge across the country, and that balancing two facts, that exclusionary discipline is harmful to students who are subjected to it, while at the same time that keeping disruptive students in the classroom harms the academic outcomes of their peers, is what makes the issue of school discipline so challenging. So the problem isn't unique to Ben Lapine, but our solutions can be. While I fully believe that every initiative we have undertaken at Ben Lapine was done with the best interest of students at heart, we must also acknowledge that it appears that some aspects are not working, and we must be willing to admit that, learn from what is happening, and make changes. I believe we must consider changes or additional training and resources to student disciplinary practices, how we think about inclusion, alternative programs and placements, grading policies, and staffing, among others. And we need to make changes with urgency, but also with careful execution so that there are not additional unintended consequences. And I was really glad to hear Dr. Cook's commitment to doing so earlier this evening. I would like to propose that we initiate two task forces. I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but I think we need one within the district and one within the community to deeply examine the possible causes and potential solutions both inside and outside of school, and to make recommendations to district leaders and to community leaders about how to address this crisis. Personally, I believe there are several common drivers of misbehavior and dysregulation that we need to address as parents and as a community. Of course, we need to hear from the community and experts before deciding, but I think they are likely to include 1, a lack of training and support for effective parenting, 2, significant and detrimental inadequate sleep for many of our students, and 3, excessive screen time. I believe that the district can do more to support parents and guardians with these issues, but that we also need community partners to step up as well. And as Steve said, we may also need to consider passing a local option to provide our schools with more staffing resources to address these increasing needs. Finally, as a Ben Lapine parent, I want to speak to my fellow parents across the district. We must take responsibility for our own children's behavior. I was dismayed and appalled to hear about the rampant disrespectful student behavior across our district. From vandalism, including to a brand new high school that I helped to design, to cussing at teachers, not listening to teachers, sitting in class with headphones on, showing up to class late repeatedly. These are not the actions of successful future citizens. And although the district certainly takes responsibility for managing student behavior at school, it is parents and guardians who must take ultimate responsibility for our children and their actions. We must do better. And we can't let the responsibility for student discipline rest on the shoulders of our teachers and staff. And so one specific call to parents, please volunteer in our schools. Be present, provide another set of hands, watch your children and how they are acting in schools. And as a district, I really would like to see us provide training to our parent volunteers so that we can really maximize their positive impact on our schools. And finally, to our students, you don't have to wait around for adults to lead here. Do your own research, lead your own campaigns and initiatives to improve student behavior and mental and physical health. And please, students, if other students in your class are being disrespectful, call them out. It's much more effective for a fellow student at the high school level to say, hey, cut it out, you're being rude. I can't learn, than for a teacher to do the same. So in closing, thank you to our teachers for sharing your concerns, for trying to do the best job possible with the limited resources we all have. I will support and encourage our superintendent to act with urgency to address these concerns. And I hope that my fellow board members will join me in leading community conversations about what we can do as a broader community to address student behavior and dysregulated students. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, for articulating what I think, well, I'll speak for myself, how I feel for sure. And just in addition to that, I wanted to say that it was pretty amazing to go to the different schools and celebrating Latinx Family Night, Asian Family Night, Black African American Family Night, and to see how much diversity is in Ben Lapine, and to celebrate that. And what I would like to extend to other folks is that even if you may not be an Asian family or you may not be a Black African American family, it is still so much important. It's so important and needed to just show up. There was a student panel at the Black African American Family Night, and the students said themselves too, just show up. That's all you gotta do, show up and bring a friend with you.
I'm going to use my time to finish reading Sarah Barclay's statement that she did not have time to finish. So, identified themes. Across all schools and grade levels, the disrupted learning environment continues to be a top priority for our members. Within this broader topic, BEA has identified the following themes. Bend educators are highly concerned about disrupted learning environments, disruptive student behaviors this year. On a scale of 0, which is no concern, to 100, the highest level of concern, indicate your current level of concern regarding disrupted learning environments, disruptive student behavior this year. The average response to this question was 83 out of 100. Our families and caregivers are doing all they can to support their children. Each and every student of our district deserves the support, resources, and educational experience that meets their needs. Our students and your employees do not feel safe in our schools. GBE-AR Staff Health and Safety outlines the district's obligation and policy on the safety of our staff. This obligation is not being met and has been unmet for an extended amount of time. Additionally, There does not appear to be a similar district policy on student safety. While with students' best interests in mind, Ben Lapine Schools simply has too many initiatives prioritized at one time. To name a few, new curriculum at many levels, changes to student assessment protocol, bias lessons, and restorative practices. All of these initiatives are important, but with so many focuses, we aren't doing any of them as well as we could. Ben Lapine Schools' new grading policy appears to align with the current research around assessment of student learning, and this modification was not rolled out in a way that supports educators, students, or families. Educators are reporting that they believe students are less invested in their learning, attending school less often, and passing their classes without the knowledge needed to be successful in our community post-graduation. Parents and caregivers were not given the information or context that allows them to support their child through this assessment transition. Educators were not given the professional development or time needed to be successful moving this initiative forward as they were directed to do. BEA supports the work BLS has begun on grading, and we must move slowly and methodically in order to ensure the best student outcomes. The BRIGHT program and inclusion model are generally supported among members, but are not resourced in a way that allows students to access the support and resources they need to be successful. Moreover, educators need appropriate time and training to implement new initiatives such as these ones. Our students, educators, and communities all deserve better. We cannot continue to subject our students and educators to unsafe and disruptive conditions in our schools. We must work together to find meaningful solutions to this crisis.
I'll be short and sweet, to the point. Thank you for all the teachers and all the administrators and all the students in your schools right now who are celebrating Black History Month. Thank you. Thank you for doing the lessons and taking them seriously, because I've heard from too many students that some people are not taking them seriously. And I think that's enough. Some of those students remember that. Please, if you do have them, please take them seriously, because it's a part of American history. It's not just Black History Month, it's American history as well. Also, I want to leave with a proverb I've learned a long time ago when I was working with my grandmother when she was doing a lot of voting rights initiatives is, we can do something really fast, you can do it on your own, but if you do it collectively, guess what? It makes it a lot easier, right? So that's what she ultimately gave me when I was growing up as a kid. Let's do this together, let's make this happen, and continue to support our students, but at the same time, give them the information they need. Ensworth, High Desert Middle School, some of the other places, like some of the high schools I got to go to for Black History Month. Thank you so much for engaging, and thank you, Melissa.
All right, thank you all. For my board comments, typically I share what I've done as a representative, and so a couple of different things. Asian Family History, or Asian Family Night, the very first one, and being able to watch families get introduced to translators and to their liaison was really a powerful experience and a celebration of that culture. The conference that I mentioned earlier, and being able to advocate on behalf of our schools, and also to be able to highlight some of our successes already. I was able to highlight the unique partnership that we have with the county for bringing in mental health counselors into our schools, as well as some of the work that is very much in the request for information stage, but around that common problem that we have around workforce housing in our city. And last, I was at COIC in Lapine this morning, getting to see the great work that they're doing for our students, and meeting with two of the Lapine high school counselors as well, and the work that they do together. Appreciations. I want to appreciate Kathy McCollum for all of the work she does overseeing the ALO program, and working with all of the different staff across our region. It's pretty remarkable. And then I want to appreciate the students that presented. It is a scary thing, but at the Asian Family Night, we had students performing for us with their martial arts routines, and then we also had a student reciting poetry for us, and so it was just really wonderful for the students to share their gifts with us. With that said, this meeting will be adjourned, and our next meeting is a work session on February 28th. Thank you.